Let me take you by the hand and lead you through the streets of London, show you something to make you change your mind.
Ralph McTell is still walking those streets of London over 50 years after he wrote his signature song. He'll be in New Zealand playing 2 shows in March. We found Ralph near Melbourne and spoke to him about his long and illustrious career.
I just was looking through my record collection and found that I had a live album of yours that was recorded in...
That's Ralph Evans in Sydney, yeah.
What do you remember about that?
Pardon?
What do you remember about that recording or that show?
Well, it was absolutely amazing because my first gig in Australia was at the Sydney Opera House.
Right.
And, it just so happened that I'd had my song Streets of London had made the charts, and they took me on, and I got a good joke that it's been downhill ever since, but that's not true. It's just been different, But starting off at the Opera House is it's a tough act to follow.
Right. So you've been doing some gigs already over there?
In Australia this time, yes. I think we're about 6 or 8 in so far.
Right.
We have a big one in Melbourne coming up, and I'm afraid I can't remember my exact itinerary, but I know.
Oh, don't worry about it.
13th and 14th we're in New Zealand, which would be great.
So at this stage, well, first of all, I realized, so I think you're in your late 70s, if I'm not mistaken, not to bring up your age too much, but it seems to be a bumper year or a time for vintage folk singers. Joni Mitchell just got her Grammy thing. I talked to Sylvia Tyson, who's, I think, in her early 80s, and it just seems like something's going on. Do you feel like that?
Well, I think the music is, sadly, the people that made this music are starting to slip away. I had the great good fortune of working with Tom Paxson just 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Right.
He came to, I was playing in Dublin for the Traditional Music Festival, and I took a flyer. I said, would you be interested in coming over to Dublin and maybe something in England? And he said, sure. And he's 86.
Oh my God.
Which is phenomenal, and he was wonderful company, and he's still sparkly, got his wits are about him and everything. I also think that people are beginning to realize that when this generation does hop the twig, as we say in England, that's it, it's gone.
Yeah.
So I think sooner or later, I coined the phrase, sooner or later these positions become available, and we must have something to offer. It was a very exciting time.
Yeah.
We witnessed it and took part in it.
I mean, let's see, Bob Dylan's a sprightly, 81 or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's not stopping.
That's right. So do you guys, well, first of all, something must have been in the water, something going on back in the 1950s. And of course, we know there was a lot of music happening around there. There was rock and roll kind of, and rhythm and blues and doo-wop and all that stuff. What led you down the folky path that you chose?
Well, I think most English guys or British guys would say it would have to begin with Lonnie Donegan, who was
that's exactly right.
He was a banjo player in a trad band, but he had a natural feeling for American music, and in particular the kind of folky music rather than the country music, I think, and songs with a bit of a message. And through that, I mean, that's when I first heard the sound of a rhythm acoustic guitar, and I thought it was really good. And I had a skiffle group myself when I was about 11. But I didn't really take it up properly until I heard the real versions of Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly.
Right.
And I was hooked, because here was simple kind of chordal music that I could handle with lyrics that said something, about our social concerns for the world, and in my case for, left-wing politics and the union, and, dignity for the working man and all that. And these songs had all that. But then, because Woody was a very eclectic in whoever he played with, I got to hear Sonny Terry's gorgeous harmonica playing, and then Blind Boy Fuller, and then who he also played with. And then I started to be fascinated by the pianistic style of ragtime and blues guitar. Blues itself is a limiting subject matter, but the guitar sort of side of it is forever. But very few people in my generation were bothering to learn about the pianistic style of these great ragtime blues players like Blind Blake, Reverend Davis, Blind Boy Fuller, Mississippi John Hurt, all those guys. And they fascinated me.
Right,
And
right.
although I would say they taught me to play the guitar, I don't try to copy their subject matter. I think there's more to write about than preoccupied those guys.
Right, right. And so when was it that you decided that A, you could write a song, and B, you had something to say?
Well, first of all, Bob Dylan freed us all from the inhibitions, because I think some of us, and I would include myself, would be able to say they could play the guitar better than Bob, but they couldn't sing like him, and they couldn't write like him. But there was an age of, I would say, it was an age of awareness outside of just pop. It was an awareness of the political situation, the Vietnam War, blah blah blah, and we suddenly had a spokesman. I know he hates that to be talked about as a spokesman. He loathes it, but
Yeah,
whether he likes it or not, those of us who could play a little bit thought, well, maybe I can write a song, maybe. And then, I didn't have to search too long before I found something to write about, which was awful, and I left that one alone. And I thought, try and write about what you know and what you've experienced, and if it carries some sort of secondary meaning that talks about, a common humanity or something that seems to fit into this new awareness, then bingo.
right.
And that's when I was in Paris as a buskin with a friend of mine when I met a young American guitar player who was very influential on me because he'd had lessons from Reverend Gary Davis and one or two others. And I was noodling around on the guitar, and he said, "Hey man, that's really pretty tune. You should write some words to that, right?" And I thought, well, yeah, maybe I can. And I started around 1964 or five to start to write.
Hmm. Yep. And of course, everybody knows Streets of London, having written a
Mm.
song like that, which is basically, it's almost like a traditional tune. Everybody, it's just in the air. And
Mm.
how does that affect the songwriter in you? Do you have to kind of aspire to it all the time? Is it
Well, it's a very good question, Marty. The thing is, yes, something like that is a double-edged sword. I was 22 probably when the germ of that idea came about and the song
right,
was finished by the time I was 23. And then I added another verse to it because I gave it to a professional singer because I wasn't a
right,
professional at that time. And he said to me, he said, well, people love this song. You ought to fit. And I just felt that it needed an extra verse. So I wrote the last verse. And first of all, the reaction to it, it didn't percolate through to me that people were singing it and covering it and everything because we didn't have the means to know that, what is
yeah.
it,
You
social
couldn't look it
media
up
and
on
all that didn't
YouTube.
exist. It just went out there,
Yeah,
it just found a home elsewhere. But then you do go through this thing, you think, will I ever escape from it? And then you think, you get to be 79, which I am now, and I think, well, why would I worry about escaping from it? It's a song that the world knows now, and
yeah,
you do think it's stopping your creativity. It really hasn't. You just try to get better at writing songs and you set your own criteria for that. And I think I have written better songs. I haven't written better popular songs than that. And that's the way it's going to be.
right. Your most recent album was what? Hill of Beans that came out in 2019.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have a huge catalog of tunes to choose from, including things that you probably want to play more than other people want to hear. When you're putting your set list together for, say, this tour coming up, and you're in Australia now and in New Zealand, what crosses your mind? What do you take into account when you have to think about
Well, I'm always assume that people only know the one song.
it? Right.
So I've got to win them over. It's actually a false belief of mine because that people come out that say that on this tour alone, people have been saying, I've been following your music for 50 years and I didn't ever think we'd ever meet up. Well, we have met up. And that is very gratifying because
Yeah.
without major chart success and the media, you don't know that your songs are finding a home, as it were.
Right.
But so I would start off with a song which I think would be quite clever on the guitar and have a simple message. And then I will start to talk about how everything I've ever written has related to my own life experience or someone that I know and they were their truths, if you like. And then I might talk about the influences, play a little bit of ragtimey stuff or stuff and I balance the set. Excuse me, look like without. I don't have too many songs in the same key. I try to vary the tempos, and by the time the first half is ended, which is usually about 45 minutes, they'll know something about me. So when I go back, I'm hoping, for the second half, they're in that zone and I can play perhaps a few more challenging things or songs that I hope they might say, what was that third song you did? And, that sort of thing. So you are sort of still promoting yourself. I think it's a privilege to play to an audience, and I don't ever just get out and express my art, as it were. I do try to entertain.
Yep. Well, I mean, you're in Australia at the same time that Taylor Swift is over there. She just played to 97,000 people, right?
Yeah, she's nicked a few of mine, I should say. I mean, I think it's a phenomenon. I don't know much about her work, but you just have to take your hat off to a young woman that is not only talented, but has taken the industry and turned it upside down and gone her own way. I mean, it's just fantastic. Fair play to her.
Yep, yep. Did you watch the Grammys at all?
No,
Nope.
I kind of like being outside the music business, to be honest with you. I like being under the radar, and I mean, every now and then my ear gets pulled towards some new music, but I'm quite happy with the old stuff, to be honest with you. I still marvel at Django Reinhardt, for
Right, right.
example. I
There you
still
go.
marvel at Oscar Peterson, Miles Davis. I mean, there's people that give me a real buzz, and then I'm sort of becoming tuned into classical music and the broader themes of love and loss that are just through music and stuff like. There's all sorts of things that draw my ear. I'm not really much interested in the industry, to be truthful, because I've never really been in it. I had a blip in my graph of music
Right.
back in the day, and I'm still working, so I'm happy.
Well, I guess that explains, I think Joni Mitchell, she made her first appearance there at age 80 now. But I mean, her singing both sides now at age 80 was a very different experience than hearing it when she was 20 something. And
Yeah.
so does that happen to you? Do your songs take on different
It's it's a
personalities?
very good question again, Marty. I was talking to a singer called Archie Fisher, who's older than me now, and he said I'm singing one of my old songs, and this is a Scotsman. You might have heard it. He's a great writer, and he said I suddenly find myself welling up, and I said I know what you mean.
Mm,
There was a kind of purity of intent, if I can call it that, where you really believed that writing good words and good music could help to change things. What it did was resonate with others. That's why he's still working, and possibly that's why I'm still working. It's changed very little. You only have to look at the world to see that.
yeah.
But suddenly, words that you wrote as a young man, full of brio and fire, and even if it was suppressed a little bit in terms of performance, it can move you,
Mm.
and that's a good thing. And when you listen to both sides now, what a mature song that was for a young woman to have written, and why, and it's even gained more gravitas when she's an older lady,
Yep.
and she's brilliant anyway, isn't she? I love her so.
All right. Well, I think I want to end it there because it doesn't get any better than hearing you talk like that.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, thanks,
That's a
Martin. It's
beautiful
been a
thing.
pleasure
Yeah.
talking with you. It's nice to
Yeah, I'm
have.
looking forward to seeing you when you get here. You're playing at the Tuning Fork here in Auckland. I was just there the other
Yes.
day, so
Yeah.
it'll be a beautiful
Well, I
thing.
look out for you, mate. That's really kind of you. And thank you for the interview.